Well, joining me now is former world chess champion and chairman of the Renewed Democracy Initiative, Garry Kasparov, Ukrainian ambassador to the UK, Vadym Prystaiko, former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt, plus Russia-born author and podcaster Konstantin Kisin. OK, well, a great panel, first of all. Garry Kasparov, let me start with thank you for being in the studio. I greatly appreciate it. What's going on? You're a chess grandmaster. Can you work out what's at play here?
Look, as a chess grandmaster, I'm used to analyze facts. And I believe what we saw was a tip on the iceberg. There's so much still underwater. I don't think Prigozhin acted alone. I think that was a much bigger challenge to Putin's power by those in Russia, mostly GRU or KGB, who were not happy with the war on Ukraine. Don't forget, Russia is a mafia state, and there's so much money is at stake. And Putin basically is a liability for those who have been doing this business with hundreds of billions of dollars. Maybe we should look for answers for Prigozhin operation in Africa. I mean, we don't know enough, but what we know is that Putin's regime looked at the facing first real challenge as a Hollywood decoration. Just big decorations, nothing behind it. So Putin made a big statement. You show the statement, 9 a.m. It's in the morning. Who followed his orders? Nobody. What was the government? Nowhere to be seen. Parliament, Senate, Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Defense, they're all gone. So it's just, it's a colossus on clay feet. And I think what we saw was just the first act of the drama. I would not trust, the stories about these deals, because again, I think there's so much is behind the scene, and it was all about, I believe, commercial interest. But what is important is the way Prigozhin troops were received by Russians. I think it's more about corruption, because the name of the Prigozhin's operation was March for Justice. And I think it's the people instinctively demonstrated. That's this corruption regime, this Putin's regime, as no support, as it claimed. The whole story of Putin was popular has been just, destroyed by the march, which stopped for no clear reasons. Prigozhin could have taken Moscow in the next 12 hours.
But none of it really makes a lot of sense. General Dannatt, we've just been told the Russian state media reporting that Vladimir Putin will make a series of important announcements this evening. That'll be his first appearance since denouncing the Wagner mutiny. What's he going to say? What do you think is going on here?
Well, it'd be interesting to see what he is going to say, because on Saturday morning he had a lot of words, but he didn't have much substance at all and looked like a man pretty much caught in the headlights. So unless he's reinvented himself something clever, I think we're going to see more of the same. I think whichever way you look at it, he is now a weakened man. And what Prigozhin's extraordinary sort of march for justice towards Moscow showed was that Putin's got very little support. Where was his army? An army in an armed mutiny situation like...
Where were they?
...can do one of two things. It can oppose the mutineers, or it can do nothing. They chose to do nothing.
Right.
And this actually speaks volumes. Even the...
Is it the beginning of the end of Putin? Historically with Russia, when this thing happens, this kind of march, if you like, or assault on whoever's running the country, tends to be the end pretty quickly.
I think it's very much related also to what is going on in the battlefield in eastern Ukraine. And I think that's an extraordinary set of circumstances. The counter-offensive, which has been talked about for a long time, well-equipped, well-trained, well-prepared. A lot of preliminary operations have been going on. There will come a point, at a point in time and space, I don't know where or when the Ukrainian forces feel they've found some weak spots. And that's when they'll press with their attack brigades, and then anything can happen.
How diminished militarily are the Russians in Ukraine right now without the Wagner Group?
Well, they are diminished because there's 25,000 or so fighters that were fighting. They were fighting side by side with them in Bakhmut until they've withdrawn. So numerically, the Russians are weaker. Also, the senior command and control from General Gerasimov down, that's now got question marks over it. How much authority can he actually deploy? And then, of course, you come to the Russian soldiers themselves. Most of them don't really want to be there.
Right.
They're poorly equipped, poorly trained, very poorly led at low level. Yes, they've got wonderful defensive positions, but if those defensive positions can be cracked into, then frankly, anything could happen. Literally anything. We don't want to get too overly optimistic, and lives are involved here. Ukrainian lives are involved here. But it's quite possible they could break through and be very successful.
Yes, I agree. Ambassador Prystaiko, I mean, I can't even imagine what your weekend was like. I was gripped to this, literally watching cable news the entire weekend. What were you doing?
Same. I was wasting 2 days of my time on weekend, quite rare thing, just to understand what is actually happening, how it can influence what is happening in our part. What I can tell you that for us, both of them, is Prigozhin or Putin, both of them are enemies. We understand that when they're fighting, it is a situation in our case, at least this 25,000 people or 6 more helicopters will now appear in Ukrainian skies. So that's what we're hoping. What was interesting also, it was not very well reflected, that what Prigozhin said before starting, he went and making...
I'm just interrupting you, Ambassador, one moment. We now have live pictures of Vladimir Putin. He's not actually talking yet. We're going to keep an eye on this. This will be an interesting statement. It's come, the press service for the Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, has written on Telegram a lot of questions, stuffing, versions and assumptions. The first one will tell everything, answer everything very soon, follow the agenda. Again, some cryptic messaging coming out of Belarus there. What do you make of that?
I hope that we'll talk now about the Minister of Defense or Chief of Defense, and if it is the part of the sort of the agreement with Prigozhin. Remember, he went to Moscow saying that he is going to undermine the particular 2 individuals, not the Putin himself. So he was leaving sort of flexibility here. But having Lukashenko in picture, they can talk now about the even sort of deeper reunification between Belarus and Russia. They might tell...
It's so volatile. Of course, on the face of it, my first thought was this looks good for Ukraine. That just as you're launching a counter-offensive, you have the Russians in total chaos. Of course, knowing the character of Putin, it could be the reverse. He might decide to double down in Ukraine, to go even harder, more aggressively. That's a potential, right?
I agree with Garry that there are some circles in Russia which will be more interested. Some of them are not happy with what is happening. It doesn't mean that it won't go and escalate even higher. And the oligarchs, nothing can be done in Russia without oligarchs or consent. So what they want, whether they want to, to get rid of sanctions, or they wanted to finish it up right now, right away. So let's escalate, let's finish it up, whatever the consequences.
Let me bring in Konstantin Kisin. Konstantin, you've been tweeting away about this the last 3 days. Fascinating, actually, to get your take on this. How are you seeing things as we're watching Vladimir Putin about to make some address? We have no idea what he's going to say, but what's your take on it?
Well, some very good points have been made so far. The one thing I would add is I think people haven't emphasized enough the fact that anybody who's going to attempt to replace Vladimir Putin is likely to be more nationalistic and more hardline than him at the moment. As you know, over the last quarter of a century, Vladimir Putin has removed everybody who's attempted to challenge him from a more liberal or more democratic position. And one of those men is sitting to your left, Garry Kasparov, of course. And so what I think people forgot in the West is there's no Nick Clegg waiting in the wings to take over. This is a very serious situation. This is a nuclear nation with the potential for civil war. So I wouldn't get too excited about it, even though, of course, we would all want to see Russia less powerful in its terrible invasion of Ukraine. So I think that's one of the things to add. And the thing that is happening right now on our screens is Vladimir Putin giving a statement. I imagine we will see him attempting to reassert authority, because what we have seen over the last many days is that his authority is certainly in question.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, Garry, you've been shaking your head there, so I'll come...
It's absolute nonsense. I mean, it's total misunderstanding of the nature of any dictatorship. After 23 years, Putin is a spine of the system. You cannot take spine away and put someone in the place. Whoever comes after Putin will start negotiating with Americans, with Ukrainians. There's no doubt about it. That's what happened after Stalin's death. So you cannot have another dictator replacing Putin, because he's the center of the decision-making process. And now it seems that he's no longer capo di tutti capi. He's not the final referee in all these negotiations between various groups. So that's why it's like, saying, oh, Stauffenberg also brought some questionable people with him, and after Hitler, we could have somebody worse. No, absolutely not.
But if you take your mafia analogy, for argument's sake, in the mafia, if the head boss got taken out, they would replace him with often somebody even worse.
It takes time. Before you have somebody else, they have to negotiate. It's more like a Politburo, which always better because they have to negotiate.
Well, what do you really think in your bones is going to happen here, Garry?
No, I think it's this growing opposition to Putin because he's losing the war. There's a huge commercial interest that is not interested to continue unwinnable war. They know this war cannot be won. And again, what will be the outcome of this fight? I don't know. But I don't think Putin will stay for too long, because if Russian history is any guide, the bad wars always led to the change of the regime.
Ambassador, what does victory look like here? Is there any potential, as some people have called, for Ukraine to cede any of the territory that the Russians have taken? Or is your position still implacable? You do not give them an inch?
That is a position that we are not going to give an inch to anybody, and Russians the first. And second, I'd like to say...
But what about Crimea, for example, which was taken years ago?
Crimea as well.
You'd like to see that?
I'd like myself to see it. That's true.
Yeah.
And by the way, we already started to liberate some of the places which were under occupation since 2014, not just recently acquired lands. So that's what we are already doing.
So do you feel total victory is now very achievable? In fact, potentially a lot more achievable than it looked last week?
Much better now, that's true. This jar with the spiders in it, who will get out of it will be wounded and will be weakened. I totally agree. And if you want to, talking about the analogy, historical analogies, if you remember when Gorbachev got back after the coup, it only took 4 months until the whole system collapsed afterward.
We've got some quotes now from Putin tonight. General Dannatt, I'll bring this to you. The organisers of this rebellion, he says, cannot but understand that they will be brought to justice. Everyone understands this. That is criminality that is aimed at weakening the country. From outside, we are threatened. However, the organisers of this rebellion have betrayed those people who were bribed into this organisation. So he's saying apparently also that society has consolidated. There's not much evidence of that. But he's suggesting from that, unless I'm misreading it, that the Wagner Group have betrayed Russia and they have to be dealt with. But there's no sign from the Wagner Group that they're fearing that going to happen.
Well, he said that on Saturday morning, that these people were brought to justice.
They didn't do anything.
By Saturday evening, he said that they would be allowed to go their way. So he's now reverting to his first speech. What do you believe? What do you understand? I mean, I think he's lashing out. I think he's showing further signs of weakness by holding completely differing points of view.
Is he done, Putin, do you think?
I think he's done. And go back to what I said before, I think when the Ukrainian army's counterattack really gets going, then I think he will be completely done. And I think the big point on the battlefield to remember is that if the Ukrainians manage to break in and break through, they haven't got to defeat the Russian army everywhere. They've just got to make the average Russian soldier think he's lost. And when an army thinks it's lost, it's lost. And that's what they've got to try and achieve. And they can do that.
Some more quotes here. Konstantin, I'll bring you in here. Putin, most of Wagner are also patriots. He closed his speech by saying President Lukashenko, obviously the Belarusian president, should be thanked for his role in this to achieve a peaceful resolution. It's a patriotic duty of everyone that has saved us. Thank you. So some kind of mixed messaging, although I guess what he's trying to say tonight is that the organisers are the culpable ones. What does that mean, though? What's he going to do?
Well, as I said, as I predicted, he was going to attempt to reassert authority. But on the other hand, he doesn't want to make enemies of 25,000 of his most capable soldiers who are quite loyal to Evgeny Prigozhin, as far as we know. But I think there was a misunderstanding about the previous point that I made. I wasn't suggesting that a coup would make Putin stronger. What I was saying was that a lot of the resistance to the regime at the moment isn't actually focused on Vladimir Putin. A lot of the criticism is of his defense minister, Shoigu, and the head of the armed forces, Gerasimov. And that, I think, is where this has all come from. This conflict has been brewing for many months now, with a war of words between Prigozhin and the Ministry of Defense. And so what I was saying, and I think this is important to say, the liberal democratic voices like Garry have been forced out of Russia. And so much of the resistance to Vladimir Putin isn't people who want democracy and stability. It's people who feel that the war is going badly, as he says, and they want someone to come in and take charge. So it remains to be seen how this one actually plays out.
Yeah, apparently, I'm just reading some reports on Twitter here that apparently he said the uprising was doomed to fail, and his organisers, even though they lost their sense of right and wrong, couldn't have failed to realise that. He also seems to say that Ukraine was involved somehow and calls the revolt revenge for their failed counter-offensive. He then ranted about Wagner's treason a bit more, and then it cut out. He didn't actually announce anything, says someone on Twitter here. Garry, what do you make of that? Mad rantings?
Yes, it's just, I think he lost control, and probably feels that He can keep talking, but nothing is happening. And what you just said now just doesn't make any sense.
No, none of it makes sense.
No.
Do you think he'll still be in charge in a month's time?
Months, maybe. Definitely not within a year. Probably, 3 to 6 months.
Ambassador, what do you think?
It will be bloody, it will be dirty, but he's going down.
General?
And there might be a churn. Someone might replace him, and then someone might replace that person. I think the second replacement could be more favourable to the West.
And just a final point, General, what message does all this send to China, who may have been considering attacking Taiwan? Is this a marker in the sand that if you do this kind of thing as a dictatorship, that actually it can backfire pretty horrendously?
The Chinese should think very carefully about taking on the world over Taiwan. Actually, the Chinese are a patient people. Just give it time. They would be most unwise to take any lessons out of this. If there is a lesson, actually, it's a coup such as Putin tried to mount on Kyiv 24th of February last year. It did not work. So just don't go there.
General, Ambassador, Grandmaster, great to see you all. Thank you very much. Great panel tonight. Konstantin, thank you as well for joining me. Much appreciated. A lot going on in Russia, a lot going on in Ukraine. Going to be fascinating few days and months to see how this all plays out.